This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Amani Roberts for the first time. Welcome to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Excited to be here.
I want to let people know we are a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. You can see the icon up there. If you use coupon code GHOST to get 1 month free premium subscription, so you can stop scrolling, start listening. Fam Electric Ghost is a featured podcast on the Newsly platform. So we want to let people know that. So we're actually going to be at episode 928 of the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. With this episode, we've been on the air and we're tracking that on Apple Podcast since 2016. And thank you again for being on the program.
All right. Sounds good. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. So one of the things I'm going to bring up your website so people can check what that is. So the AmaniExperience.com for those of the audience that are just on the audio. So it's www.AmaniExperience.com. So if people go to that website, what do they find?
They'll find just information about all the things I do, whether it be DJing, my book, professional speaking. That's kind of what's talked about on the website. Also have my podcast that I used to do but took a hiatus. That's on there as well. So they'll get a good background information in terms of who I am.
Okay, that's cool. So I think one of the topics we wanted to get into is like why are podcasting interviews networking gold? And I believe that because I'm a podcaster myself. But maybe you can talk about and I'm a big believer in the live podcast, which you can see we're doing right now. But maybe you can talk about your point of view on that.
I think that live streaming, which we're doing now, and podcasts in general, is just great for networking. It allows for a one-on-one connection with, whoever you're interviewing and the interviewer and the interviewee. I also think that it provides content as long as you use it and post it up periodically. It provides great content examples too, where you can use clips from the interviews, whether it be the video clips or the audio clips, to just build out your content schedule. And I just think it's kind of the modern way of networking.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I got into it, I'm primarily I was a musician, and back in 2016, this guy who ran a podcast on an app called Spearmint found my SoundCloud and said, "Hey, I want to do a podcast." I didn't even know what it was. So what's that? He said, "Well, it's like a radio interview." And then we got the first one done, and then we liked each other so much we did a podcast for like 6 months, and I hadn't planned it. And then from there, I said, "Why don't I go do what he did? I'm going to go find musicians on Instagram, and just off the cuff ask them if they want like a behind the music interview." And that's where this whole podcast started. And we were just audio. And then we moved into this realm in the last 2 years. And it's opened up to beyond musicians. We're talking to like life coaches, shamans, CEOs, authors, film directors. We decided to go kind of expansive and created this, if we have 300 interviews with musicians, over 100 interviews with like coaches and mentors. And, you just build this Rolodex of all these people that you've talked to, and it causes like, leads that you didn't even know you were going to get.
It's very effective. I've been podcasting since maybe 2008, different formats. So I've been around for like 15 years, and it's very valuable, very valuable.
So in your opinion, like there's a lot of people who try to go for perfection with the edited podcast that's not live. And, I've always been kind of like a jazz musician. I like the kind of spontaneous nature of doing it live, and it just fits my personality. So, and I've dealt with like editing my stuff and putting it into reels for promotional purposes. But what is it about like a live stream that you like?
It's kind of just the exact opposite of you. Like, it'll never be perfect. You could have, whether your dog is around or, the sound might drop for a couple of seconds, but it's very authentic. It's very genuine. And then once you're engaging with the chat, it's like a call and response. So people are very involved. It's very interactive, which is kind of the way TV I think is going, where you're going to more interactive TV, where, people are watching a show, can interact with the host and the guests, ask questions, get them answers, so they'll stay around. You take it even further, like you're streaming on Twitch, you can have like emotes there, subscriptions, people supporting, people
Mhm.
controlling the broadcast. It's just a whole new level to like live broadcasting, which I'm a fan of.
Yeah, I think it's the authenticity. It's kind of like, because you're a DJ and like when you go, you might have a plan, but I
Hmm.
think like most musicians, you vibe off the crowd, right?
Right.
So musicians, like you get into a crowd situation. I'm a keyboardist, so I'm playing. I feed off what the crowd is giving me. So I might not play the same thing every night because based on the club vibe or the audience
Right.
vibe or even a
Hmm.
vibe with my fellow musicians. And I find that better than even being in the box, because we can be in a box, nowadays with like Pro Tools and stuff. I can have a lot of stuff just automatic and I'm kind of running
Hmm.
on automatic, but I enjoy the part where I'm interacting with my music.
Right. Yeah. I think, very spontaneous. No two rooms are ever the same room when you're DJing or playing, whether I'm DJing on Twitch or in real life. So you have to be able to adjust, be flexible, and just ride the white wave with the crowd.
Yeah, it's kind of like that feeling that there's like I was watching like famous jazz musician and he said there's no bad note, right?
Mm,
That it's how you recover from what you perceive as that bad note. And the
right.
person who doesn't recover from it or know how to handle it, then it becomes obvious that they didn't do what they wanted, right? But
Yeah.
if you learn how to kind of ride that moment and nobody's so into perfection that you kind of take it as it comes and you're not as uptight about it, then you can have fun with it.
Agreed. 100%. Yeah. Just kind of roll with it. Be spontaneous. There are no mistakes, only gifts, and keep it moving.
So podcasting, you propose that podcasting should be used for businesses, where maybe some businesses don't do it, and then maybe you can make the argument like, why should a business that doesn't podcast, why should they get into podcasting, and why should they get into like live podcasting?
I think it's just a great marketing tool for businesses to reach their customers on a more intimate basis. And also will open up their potential customers around the world, because once you start to do a live stream or a podcast, anyone around the world can tune in live or watch the recording or listen to it. So it just opens up your market, and you never know who can become a customer. And then it also helps people who are your current customers get to know you better on a more personal level. Maybe they want to interact, ask questions, talk to you about a product, and then maybe instead of going through customer service, they can tune into the live stream and ask questions. And then it also helps for collaboration. If you work with other partners in your space, maybe you have a podcast episode together where you talk about your relationship, and maybe that's how you can develop new partnerships, like you gave the example of when you first had that first interview. So I think it makes sense. It'll allow you to give your company and business more content for your LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook page, wherever, and it just helps create more organic and authentic content compared to the highly curated set of content.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people with businesses are kind of familiar with like the infomercial, where it's got like highly scripted, highly edited type of interaction. And I think that's what kind of blasé when you have the live podcast that you can have that interaction with your customer in real time. It's not that set script. And people today, probably, it's again that authenticity of a live broadcast and actually answering questions or being able to, propose things and be able to I think just the organic nature of that compared to something that's scripted you probably get people that will stay on longer compared to an infomercial, something that seems more authentic, right?
Agreed. Like if it's interactive, interactivity is the key. People will come back, they'll return a second time, they'll want to chat. And I think that's the key. If you can make it interactive and more authentic, then you've stumbled upon some gold. So keep moving in that direction.
Now, there's one question I thought was interesting is like, what can business owners learn from a DJ? 'Cause I've tried to weave that into my podcast. Is like, how can a musician talk to a CEO, right? And I kind of answered that myself a couple of times, but the idea that creativity and art, you can actually have a conversation where they don't have to be on separate lanes, right? So I'm assuming that that's kind of where you're going, but maybe you can tell me.
Yeah, I think which I kind of talk about a lot in my first book. Um, a DJ set is very similar to growing a business or growing a career. Say if it's a 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. set, at 10 p.m. you're just getting into the club and starting up. You're trying to see who's there, who can you keep there. Same thing in business. When you first start off, you're just trying to identify your ideal client, your ideal avatar, and who your business is going to be working with. You kind of fast forward to maybe 11 o'clock. There's troubleshooting. Something always goes wrong, as a musician, as a DJ, but the music can never stop. So same thing with businesses. You might have to make, some adjustments to your preferred products or services that you're selling. It might not be what you had first anticipated. And so you have to adjust on the fly. Same thing when you're growing a career. You might go to school for, say, psychology, but then you end up working in hospitality and you take that and you run with it. So you have to be flexible and be able to troubleshoot on the run. You get to prime time, midnight, you just want to play hit after hit, song after song, so the crowd is dancing and singing along. In business, you want to grow sales week over week, year over year, month over month. In your career, you want to continue to ascend, go from one job to the next while you're working your way up whatever corporate ladder that you are presented with. And then, there's a time period later in the set. I love slow jams, so I'm going to play some slow jams as the night comes to a close. That's using nostalgia to make you think about times back when you had less worries. Businesses are very effective using nostalgia, whether it be like Old Spice, Adidas with Stan Smith shoes, Nintendo. They use nostalgia very effectively, and it can be very, very, very important. Then after the set is over, there's a chapter on feedback. I used to close down from the club, go out to my car. I drove for Uber. I would turn on my Uber meter, pick up people, and many times they were the same people that were in the club. So I would ask them, what'd you think of the DJ, the music? Would you like? What would you change? Then when I get close to dropping them off, I'm like, by the way, I was a DJ tonight, so thank you for the feedback. And they would kind of bug out or whatever. So that's kind of the ways that, a DJ or a musician can really relate to a CEO as you're trying to grow a business or maintain a high level of performance.
That's interesting because I think I was an Uber for a while, for like 5 years. And I think that to get the 5-star, you had to have that communication with the client, right?
Yeah.
And so before I was really heavy into podcasting, I felt that the Uber experience and trying to maintain your 5-star rating by basically, you like any taxi driver, you communicate as part of your job. You're like a hairdresser. You're talking to the customer, and how you
Yeah.
talk to the customer is that communication skill opens it up. And I think that helped me be a better host, because it's the same kind of thing. Like, you have to learn how to deal with people. And
Absolutely.
I think when you get into podcasting, once you make it a live podcast, and then if you think about being a musician, it's like that interaction with people. You have to know your audience. Like, you're getting feedback from your audience, and they didn't even know you were the DJ. But the idea that, like, it's a give and take. It's a two-way street. Like, you pick up if your fans are getting it or they don't get it. You make improvements. You do continuous improvement, even in the same set. You can pick it up,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly, for sure.
Yeah, so that's an interesting dynamic. And then the other piece of it, I guess, like if you're how the concept of DJing and team building, and another like a business aspect. So maybe you can talk about DJing and the concept of team building and where you can find the synergy or the similarities.
Yeah, like I do like a we'll say like a breakout session or like a workshop with companies, businesses, individuals, groups, where I kind of teach them how to DJ, use DJing and music as the team, the foundation of the team building activity, where first we'll bring them in and ask them to create a DJ name that reflects themselves somehow, some way. Then they go around and share what their name is, why they created it. Then I ask them to create or pick their kind of walk-up song. I say, okay, if you're introducing yourself or if you're walking up and going to bat in a baseball game, what song is playing? Then they kind of go around and share the song, and then they share why that song is important to them. And then, we keep going. And then maybe we'll take them and they'll have to create in groups like a record label name. So now they're going to create a record label name for their groups, which kind of just continues to let the walls come down and help them get to know each other better. Then they create a record label name, and then we advance on to kind of the theme song for their current year. And if they're going to pick a song that's going to be like their theme for the year, they're going to do that. And then this is all while they're coming back and forth, going on the microphone. Many times people are scared to talk on the microphone, are scared to speak up in public. So it continues to get them more comfortable, break down some barriers. And that's, that kind of takes you to the 4 main steps of the team building activity. It's a lot of fun. There's a turntable there, and we work everything out. And that's the general synopsis of the team building activity.
That's the kind of thing I've been always kind of pushing, being an artist myself, because I'm in IT. I'm a software designer. And what I found is, like, I'm a synthesist. So, behind me, I got all my synthesizers, my Moogs, and all that stuff. So I'm kind of old school in the same kind of old school DJ, use a, I'm old school that I'm using a Moog. I'm actually playing the bass line on the Moog. But the idea that music and creativity, when you bring it into that kind of team building setting, a traditional project manager may not even thought of that type of scenario. They kind of pull from the creative mind, the artist mindset, and bring that into the area of the corporate world where it tends to be like very logical, very monetized, not thinking that, is a Wall Street mentality. And they're like, that's not Wall Street. Like, maybe it is, because how did all these startups get around? Because they have people who are like very, very creative. The Bill Gates, the Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, they're super creative. They're not just like in the box. They're not just sitting. They asked the question, like, why not? They did stuff that didn't exist. They didn't just clone things. They thought of new ideas, and that's scary. Now, being a creator, the thing is, like, you're willing to put yourself out there where you could get a hater response and say, well, I don't like that. But at least you put it there, right? If you just sat there and say, well, I'm never going to be as good as, DJ Jazzy Jeff, like, then you're never even going to try, right? You're never going to try. I could never even be that. But you have to make a choice. It's like, well, maybe I could be that, right? It's like, when you got into DJ, and who were your like heroes? What made you feel like you wanted to do it and you could do it?
I would say, like, first DJ that comes to mind is like Biz Markie. I one of the first ones I saw, may rest in peace, at a club in DC when I was a senior at Howard University. So I saw Biz Markie. He was a good one. And then as I started to move around, I moved to Chicago. DJ Twilight Tone, who used to be Kanye's DJ, he was another good one. Always in the background would be Jazzy Jeff too. And then I kept moving around and got to LA. There was another DJ in DC. I forget his name. He would always DJ at this club in Georgetown and down the basement. I have to find out what his name was, because he was good too. I forget his name. And then LA, you get here, and some of my instructors, like I went to Scratch Academy. So like Mr. Chalk was a good DJ, DJ Revolution, D Fresh. Those are some that come to mind. And, DJ Tina T, based out of Vegas, phenomenal DJ, phenomenal human also. And so those are just some DJs that, I met. Then once you get to the pandemic, it opened up my world to DJs outside of kind of where I was living. So you have like Vince Adams, you'll have like Mr. Stretch, Team Shellens, just a phenomenal DJ and promoter. Just lots of different, Beezus, the DJ, really, really dope DJs there. Just phenomenal DJs that are out there that kind of continue to show me the way.
Yeah,
I can name a bunch more. But those are some that come to mind. Yeah.
It's always cool to hear people's influences. Like, as a musician, like, a lot of my stuff is like Parliament Funkadelic. Like, Bernie Worrell on the keyboards, Stevie Wonder, Rick Wakeman, looking at keyboardists, like, all the great Elton John, Billy Joel. Like, if you're going to be a keyboardist, you kind of look to, Ray Charles, you look at all the classics, you go back into jazz, you listen to Sun Ra, you listen to Coltrane, you listen to Mingus, you listen to those bands, and he's like, those are the kind of tones you want to get as a keyboardist. Like, you want to have a kind of a range, to do the complexity, and so the jazz, the bebop and fusion gives you like a lot of a lot of space to figure out like where could you go, and you go to progressive rock and funk. It gives you a lot, and then you can see like I would think a lot of those things end up integrating into what you do, because a
Mhm.
lot of rap is or electronic music or even DJing is heavily P funk, heavily into a lot of old school James Brown, a lot of Motown stuff. There's a lot of people sampling different things from those, from the Funk Brothers and all that stuff. But so, what's your kind of feel on that?
Well, no, that's a great topic there, because the topic of my second book is why there are no longer any black R&B groups. And so we talk about some of those groups you just mentioned: P-Funk, Parliament. We talk about the Isley Brothers, the Gap Band, all these groups here. So I mentioned that because a lot of my inspiration comes from a lot of the groups of like the 80s, the 90s, the 70s. I love, really big fan of like 90s
Hmm.
R&B, 90s hip hop. But there were some tremendous groups, back in the day that kind of blaze the path for what you're hearing today on the radio, like Kool and the Gang. Kool and the Gang is probably one of the most sampled artists of
Oh
all
yeah,
time. And a
yeah,
lot of
like
people take that for
Parliament.
granted. Yeah, Parliament too,
Yeah.
the Isley Brothers, a lot of these groups here. Even if you go back to like the 60s, because the way I'm designing the book is we go decade by decade. And if you
Hmm.
look at the 60s, the Supremes were a phenomenal group. They went on a run that is unprecedented with like,
Yeah,
I think almost,
fantastic
it
run.
was like 10 or 14 of their singles were in the top 20. And I think, or 12 to 14. And like they had like 8, 9 or 10 number one hits. Like that is unprecedented. And this is not for the R&B charts. This
Yeah,
is for
yeah,
the Hot
yeah.
100, the regular pop,
Yeah, they were pop.
R&B country.
Motown was like
Yeah.
challenging the,
Yeah.
they were like the
So
Beatles.
yes,
Motown
they were here.
had the power of the Beatles.
Mhm.
They had a hit machine. I mean, it was a hit machine. You had all those the Funk Brothers and Smokey going in there writing. Marvin Gaye was a writer. You had all these
Yeah.
great writers. Stevie is in there. All these great writers, the Four Tops. All those bands.
Temptations.
Everybody was
Yeah.
like contributing at a high level to the
Yeah.
songs. Like
Yeah.
they were very much involved in what was going on. And then when
Mhm.
you read the stories and watch the documentaries like of the Funk Brothers, I kind of key on them because they
Mhm.
were really heavy, kind of like the thread that ties it together. Like a lot
Mhm.
of those writers and those players, those session musicians, along with the writers, they just they had techniques on the tambourine. They had a
Mhm.
Motown guy that was on the tambourine that had this style that was like in every song. They found a
Mhm.
way to layer it, and they had the Percy shuffle. You had all these like certain techniques in percussion and drumming and layering that is like George Martin level stuff that people kind of
Yeah.
ignored. That the fact that
Yeah.
songwriting craft and capability was like on par with what the British invasion bands were always being pushed up, that they were like the best. But you look at they were actually saying the Beatles were inspired by Motown. If you
Mhm.
talk to
Yeah.
John Lennon and Ringo, they come back and say Motown was like inspiring them.
Yeah. Yeah. It was unprecedented run, and it just continued pretty much through mid 70s, I'd say. And then luckily, and then they at first they signed the Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson, but then they left to go to a different label, and that's kind of when their run sort of started to decline. But phenomenal run, and you just have a ton of groups, so that's kind of where I get all my inspiration from.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I like the Delphonics and the stylistics and the stack sound as well, because
Hmm.
there's a lot of you can get into the depths of it. But like, like there's so much great music from that era. Like I'm a big fan of like the Delta blues and Lead
Mm,
Belly, Robert Johnson, like the birth of the real, because like everybody's like, well, yeah, they act like rock is just like Led Zeppelin or
hmm.
it's just like Aerosmith. Like rock is a black foundation, just like jazz. It comes
Yeah.
from like the idea of going to the crossroads. You get the Robert Johnsons, you get all the Kings, all the
Hmm.
the or Albert King, all those guys, BB King. These guys actually are the foundation of rock, and then the
Hmm.
foundation of jazz, and foundation of like all the great forms are coming from like African American development
Oh yeah. Yeah.
in
That's
music.
yes, you're
It's
you're 100%
inherently
right.
American.
You're 100% right, and that could be the topic of another book that needs to be written, because that's I remember the Isley Brothers. first song, "Shout," that's a rock song. That was a rock song that they released. Then they went on to more R&B, but back in
Yeah.
1959, they hit
Hendrix
the
was
chart with the "Shout," and that's a rock song. So yeah.
Hendrix was the sideman for them for a while. There actually
Yeah.
been releases in the Hendrix catalog of songs that he actually was the sideman with also Little Richard. He played with Little Richard, played with the Isley Brothers. So it kind of showed you the rock roots is a lot
Mhm.
of those bands, like so-called Chitlin Circuit. Hendrix
Mhm.
was on the Chitlin Circuit before he went to London, and he
Yeah.
played with almost all the major soul bands. And he,
Mhm.
a lot of times he got in trouble because he was showboating. And actually, I have like tape with the Isley Brothers say, "Hey, you can't showboat on my record."
Mhm.
But it's just like, yeah, there was a rock foundation. There's a rock foundation to that stuff because Hendrix is on some of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Mhm.
So it's always I always have to teach some of the kids like it's not just Led Zepp. Go back and
No.
listen to this. Even
Yeah.
listen if you ever watch Keith Richards from the Stones, he always gave deference to the black acts.
Mhm.
He
Yeah.
he kind of there's a documentary he did with Chuck Berry, and he totally was like in awe of Chuck Berry. And he
Yeah.
gave a lot of deference and respect to Chuck Berry and a lot of the other soul guys and rock guys. He thought they were gods. And sometimes people don't think of it that way. They kind of do the reverse. They say, "Oh, the Stones are
Uh,
the gods." And I'm like,
no.
okay, well, they if you actually talk to them, they'll actually say that it was the other guys.
Yes. Yeah. So listen to them when they tell you that. That's exactly true.
Yeah, it's just like you gotta teach people because sometimes people aren't learning history right anymore. But yeah, it's just I think music is an interesting thing. What I've tried to do, with the podcast is use a music theme, which I think music is universal because
Mhm.
music is like the soundtrack to people's lives. It kind of triggers memories. It triggers pictures, like sound painting. You hear a song, it brings up a picture. So it's a universal thing, and I like the way how you brought it into the corporate world with the team building and how business owners, and I'm trying to do the same thing with podcasts where like, well, how could somebody as a musician talk to a CEO? Well,
Mhm.
it's not that different. And actually, a lot of these guys are actually starting to see they need to bring that creative energy into their organizations.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, what do you have on deck for, like you said, you're working on more books?
Right, right. So like I was just explaining, like, so this next book is like, the working title is "Have You Seen Her?" And it's based on the disappearance of Black R&B groups. So you go back through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and then midway through the 2000s, like you'd always have Black R&B groups on the Billboard Hot 100 charts. And I always have
Mm,
to let people know this is the Hot 100 charts. This is the biggest chart there is, where there'll be the pop artists, the hip hop, uh, country, everything. And Black R&B groups dominated the charts through mid 2000s. Once Beyonce left Destiny's Child, they pretty much fell off and haven't returned since. And
mm,
we're coming up on about 18 or 20 years since they really dominated the charts. So we're going to look at the history, which I'm kind of going through now, in terms of 10 to 11 groups per decade that were really good. We have a formula where we take into account the number of gold and platinum records they had, their Billboard Hot 100 top 20 hits, Grammy wins, and then also any notable performances. So if you think back in the day, if you had a Black R&B group that would perform at the Kennedy Center, at the White House, or if they were on the Tonight Show, that was a really big deal because that wasn't too common. Now, as you move forward,
mm,
it's became a little more common. So that's kind of the qualifying factors for the top 10 list, with some honorable mentions per decade. And then we talk about, after that, we talk about, well, what happened? What were the 5 reasons? There's probably more than 5 reasons that the groups kind of went away. And then we kind of make some predictions about what will the future hold. So that's kind of the big project I'm working on now, the second book. I'm very excited about it because I'm quite passionate about the topic. And as I'm doing the research in the writing, I'm learning more and more and more, just information I didn't know. Like for example, when I was talking to you about the Supremes, like their run, I was unaware that their run was so unprecedented. Like beside the Supremes, there was never a group. There was never a girl group since the Supremes that were as successful and popular until we get to TLC in the mid 90s. So that's a good 30 years, 35 years between those girl groups that were popular. And then if you look at TLC, they are the first girl group in history to have a album go diamond, which is 10 million records sold. And then they were able to get their second diamond record, because the first one was Crazy Sexy Cool that came out in 1994. Then Fan Mail came out in 1999, and that one was their second diamond album. So now, between TLC and the Chicks, otherwise known as the Dixie Chicks, are the only two girl groups in history to have diamond records, which is a phenomenal feat. And then you add on the fact that TLC was so successful and had to claim bankruptcy early on. So that's just a little summary about what the book is, my biggest project, but that is kind of what's the main focus right now.
That's interesting because it shows there's a demand and that the people will respond to that type of group. But it seems like the record industry seems to either doesn't get it, or they get into a trend like, this is the hip hop age, this is the EDM age, this is the age of not doing artist development, right? So if you've got to put a bunch of money into a 4-person group, it's cheaper to put it into a group that maybe doesn't require that kind of expense. The same thing if you look at rock bands. How come you don't see like the Arrows, like a modern Rolling Stones or a modern Who or Yes or a Genesis? You don't see those because you have to pay to build those bands. If you actually see the history of those bands cared so much about their stuff. Yes used their first advance to buy their synths, to buy equipment. They used all the money to buy the equipment. You know, you go out to Pink Floyd, they did the same thing. These bands used to put the money into the development to create what they were doing. And so if you don't get companies that would give you that kind of money, you got to come up with yourself. So how many people are going to do that? In an age where you can go in the DAW and just do it on your computer.
It's very different, but you bring up a great point about, first of all, you brought up a great point about the record labels making a decision that they want to be cheaper, which was kind of sparked by the recession back in 2007 to 2010. Then you talk about EDM music, which, you mentioned, which is another great point, because then the record stations thought that that music was a little more palatable than like R&B music because it was less sexual and less undertones. So that's a big factor. And then you also mentioned financials, of course. We didn't even talk about like hip hop, the emergence of hip hop being mainstream. But the question is, why couldn't hip hop and R&B music stay mainstream? It's like the record labels made a choice between one. And so that's a question that needs answering. And then you get into like playlisting with the Telecommunications Act of 96, and a lot of the radio stations, like wherever you are, like you can hear the same songs in LA. I was just in Chicago, Minnesota, Atlanta, DC. You'll hear the same songs pretty much on the radio stations because of the playlisting. But you look at the companies that own all the radio stations, the top three, whether it be iHeartRadio, Cumulus Media, Townsquare Media, you look at their board of directors, pretty much all old white men. Now, of course, they've made some corrections recently where they have some maybe white females, African-American females, African-American males. But, back in 2000, 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, it wasn't very diverse. And so they're the ones who are beholden to the advertisers, which was where they get their money. So they had some influence on what was played. So that's a big thing between the Telecommunications Act of 96. And then I'm sure you're aware, but growing up, you had like African-American media publications like Ebony, Essence, Jet, Vibe magazine. They're all gone now. Sure, they have digital versions, but at the heyday, they had over 8 million monthly subscribers, and that's down to lower than 750,000 when it was the predominant promoter and earned media opportunity for Black groups. That's a problem. So that just gives you an outline of the reasons why, and some of the mentions, some of the examples that you gave, which I agree with.
Well, it seems like the music has gone, back in the day, like Motown was hitting the top 100, not just soul. There wasn't just soul. It seems like we've gotten back into segmentation in the market. That you're a hip hop band, you're an EDM band, you're a soul band. But you used to have bands that could cross over multiple genres. You
Mhm.
know, you get Marvin Gaye's hitting the pop chart,
Mhm.
right? Michael was hitting the pop chart, not just the soul chart. And, you know, so the idea that people have gone back and kind of segregated the radio. And like,
Yeah.
why did you do that? Because maybe
Yeah.
the boardroom doesn't look like us.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
but
know,
if you hear
that,
like if a song pops off now, and it's maybe like it's hip hop or maybe R&B, it's less frequently because there's less promotional avenues. It will still cross over to the Hot 100 charts and do well. It's just there's just less of them now. It's just being promoted less, played on the radio less, so it's a little bit more challenging. But if a song really true pops, there might be one or two a year that will pop
yeah.
off that get to the Hot 100 chart compared to years before when it could have been 10 to 12. So that's the change right there.
Yeah, just also you got, well, in my opinion, as a producer, you got like a limited amount of producers that are in this kind of mindset that if they repeat things, they get money, right?
Hmm.
So if they keep on reusing the same beats, keep on using the same plugins, the same things, and they wrote it and they're producing 10 bands and they're all doing the same thing, then you get kind of this homogeny, right? And then that to me is like the antithesis of creativity from the
Hmm.
height of the, you know, the music eras in the 50s and 60s, 70s. You had the ability of a lot of people coming out of left field. We're doing things that are very innovative, and not just the same group of producers, multiple producers from different points of view, different parts of the world. And now he's getting kind of into like a limited number of people saying, well, this is what music is. And
Hmm.
this is what a hit is. And
Hmm.
then you're not allowing a lot of variation. So things will build from TikTok or reels that will come out of left field, and they don't control that. But you know, then they try to control it once it happens.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a different environment nowadays than it was in the past. You mentioned TikTok, that's how a lot of songs kind of will be discovered. However, there's still opportunities out there. It's just kind of trying to get to the right people to play the music and to promote it.
Yeah, it seems like we're kind of in the age like a 50s, where like
Mhm.
I like the kind of late 60s album oriented age. Just
Hmm.
being a musician myself, I grew up in the 70s. I'm a child of the 70s. I listen to albums, right? Kids today, they listen to the playlist. They hear an artist, they maybe only know one song from that artist or whatever they're what playlisted. They don't go and listen to like the whole Marvin Gaye "What's Going On." They wouldn't go
Yeah.
listen to Stevie Wonder intervisions or songs in the key of life, which is like
Hmm.
today. I mean, like in the 70s, I mean, songs in the key of life is like 2.5, it's like 2 hours long. Like,
Yeah.
what do
No.
kids listen to something like that? Or even Marvin Gaye's 40, you know, 40, 37 minute what's going on. People don't have the attention span to give an artist. And really, to me, the gems are the deeper tracks that aren't even the radio
Right.
tracks, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Like the
that
attention
the
span.
listener is so distracted. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the attention span is much lower now, and they're even making songs like you will rarely hear a song that's now longer than 3 minutes. Where back in the day you could get a 5 or 6 minute track. Nowadays it's like verse, chorus, verse, outro. And it's the songs are much shorter, and so it's just and
Yeah.
there's not a lot of live instrumentation in songs. It's mostly all produced in house, and there's no hardly any more session musicians for a lot of the music now. Just it's very different. Times have changed, so maybe that's another reason why R&B music is behind, because they haven't adapted to the change that's currently. But I have a feeling it's something else.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of the core R&B was the fact that you had these session musicians. You had those Motown guys, you had the Stax guys, you had these set like iconic Percy Shuffle. You had people that were these like great talents, and they were kind of running the show, and they were the hit makers, and everybody knew you had to go find somebody that could do a Percy Shuffle, somebody that could play a bass. You know, they
Hmm.
could play it like, Bootsy. Somebody could do it. Somebody could play like the Motown guys. Get the horn sections that you had, like Earth, Wind, and Fire horn sections. You know, Like,
Yeah.
where do people need it? I would just go do with synthesizer horns. But that
Yeah.
ain't what you hear on Cool and the Gang and Earth, Wind, and Fire, or what you hear like on Parliament P Funk, and you see 25 people on stage actually really playing. That to me is
Yeah.
like I'm kind of like, I was the guy that was into Frank Zappa and P Funk because I was more experimental. Like I like Sun Ra.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna
Yeah.
go look for the bands that were gonna do these 20-minute jams because like the Dead used to do. But I mean the idea, but there is still a market for that. Like what I do on my
Yeah.
podcast a lot of times, I still talk to musicians who play, and
Mhm.
they're kind of in the underground, emerging artists, and they're worldwide. They're not just anywhere. I talk to them like wherever they are. I've
Mhm.
talked to bands from South Africa, from France, from Russia, from Netherlands, from Africa. There's still people doing it. They just don't
Mhm.
get in the top 10. And so what I
Right.
do with the podcast is I try to give them a platform so kids will actually find out there's other stuff going on other than what's in the box.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Good on you for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think creativity is always going. There's waves that happen. Because nobody saw that Nirvana thing happen, and everybody thought rock was dead, and Kurt Cobain showed up. Then grunge
Yeah.
showed up. To me, that
Mhm.
always is going to happen when the kids will finally, say, "Well, I actually want to hear a rock band. I want to hear a punk band. I want to hear a soul band. I want to hear a funk band. Somebody's going to come across that's so dynamic that it'll force it to happen. And then the way the industry is, they will just go clone it. Like you'll get
Mhm.
like a bunch of clones of that person.
Mhm.
Then you'll
Yeah,
get a
for
whole new
sure.
age again. But I'm always hoping. So in terms of being lucrative, how do you monetize live streaming? I mean, I have my own thoughts on that, but your point of view.
I think to monetize live streaming, there's a couple different ways you can do it. Of course, you have whether the platform you're on, like a subscription model, like on Twitch or whatever, or maybe you go to like a platform like a Patreon where you can get a higher cut of the subscription. You get sponsorships there on the live stream. Those are probably the two main donations, which can be very, very impactful on the stream that you can use. You can also use the stream to then sell your merchandise, whatever merch you have. And then kind of after the stream, I think one of the best ways is to try to consistently, which I need to work on myself, consistently share clips and highlights on like YouTube with the good thumbnails and grow. And I also recommend live streaming on YouTube Live and then sharing clips on your channel. And then once you can get to, I think now it's like 500
Mhm.
subscribers, then you can start to monetize everything in the ads and everything on YouTube. I think that is kind of a hidden benefit that people kind of forget. And I think that's a good way to monetize. And then that's those are the ways that come to mind right away. Because really the live stream will lead you into other in real life gigs as a DJ or as a digital host or a live stream producer, and that's where you can really really start to monetize it. There's also sponsorships you can get, uh, that would just include everything you're doing in the live stream, everything you're doing on social, your newsletter. Like there's lots of different ways to kind of start with the live stream, take that content and put it up on YouTube, and then use that to really partner with some companies that can then hire you or work with you to be a sponsor of all your content.
Yeah, it's true. Because I mean, I've had situations where I've gotten sponsored. I have one now with like Newsly. But the other thing I found is like with Facebook and Instagram, getting monetized on Reels.
Right.
And so I found a way to clip my podcast, and on Facebook Reels, people can give me stars. And
Hmm.
that's like you get money. You get money for, so if you do like, do 90-second clips of the best of every episode and then put them on a platform where people can give you stars, then you actually get stars. And then
Yeah.
also through like my record, BMI, my pro organization, I was able to license my music
Mm.
on Twitch. So my
Hmm.
music is so as Twitch streamer uses my stuff, I get paid through BMI for my stuff, my
Very
original
good.
pieces. So I mean,
Yeah.
there's things you can do. Being a synthesist, I can do things where I get companies like, well, I actually got like a therapist to come to me. So I want art therapy music for my thing, so I'm going to pay you to produce some music for my therapy
Yeah.
program. Then I was like a lead generation that I didn't
Hmm.
even know was going to happen. But you
Yeah.
just kind
Excellent.
of put it out there. If you show up every day and people
Hmm.
know you're a producer, know you're a synthesis, know you create electronic music, then some people come up to you and say, "Oh, can you do this? Can you do that?" And then you get these like, unsolicited collaboration opportunities like that. That's the kind of lead generation that's like unknown opportunity that comes from actually being out there showing your brand.
Yeah. Yeah. Well done. Good job.
Yeah, I'm a strong believer in what you're saying. So I want everybody to know, like, you go to your website, AmaniExperience.com, just to repeat it for those of you on the audio. You click on that, you can find out
Hmm.
more about what you're doing, all the things, your books, your anything that is Amani Experience. You can get to it, and that will be clickable when we fully publish that. Right now, you just have to type it in, but it's clickable when on the full published
Hmm.
podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
So do you find things like having URLs that are clickable would be one thing that I think in the future of some of these podcast platforms that I've kind of been pushing for the tech people, that like what you see there, you see that link, but you can't click on it until I publish, like a
Hmm.
new technology to make it like clickable when you're in a live stream,
Right.
not just when you're done, but to actually make those things active in the middle of a program. I haven't seen that tech yet, but I think that would be very useful for a lot of people if a companies would propose that, on their platforms to make it so you can do that.
I think right now we're using StreamYard, but if you were to do your broadcast using a platform like OBS, Open Broadcast System, or VMix, there are ways you
Mhm.
can add interactive links into your video as it's broadcasting out. I have yet to do it, but I've seen it be done before by specific plugins. They've got
OBS,
majors.
you can do it.
Yeah, so like you can do it through there, and then also you have links that are clickable in the chat. As the chat's going by, you can get certain bots to every 15, 20, 25 minutes to drop down some links that people can
Oh,
click on.
AI.
You can also do like commands too, like maybe it's exclamation point phantom, and they'll get a link to click on something. So there are ways where you can have it on the
Oh, it's fantastic.
screen, you can have it on the chat, you can have viewers put in commands so that they can click and engage, and that's possible now. It's just you probably have to use a platform outside of like a StreamYard, like an OBS or VMix to really make it happen. But I think that you know that'll be coming to even more of a mainstream very soon.
Yeah, I think like the platforms like this one are probably going to start to engage on that more and more. But
Hmm.
like, yeah, in between OBS, I've used for my podcast festival. Like, I do a
Hmm.
podcast festival every once in a while where I have a bunch of bands come on, and
Hmm.
I've used OBS for that, so I can look into that. And I think also AI is going to open up a lot of opportunities. I was just wondering
Hmm.
what your opinion on AI, because AI as a marketing tool, as a distribution tool, as a ability to do what you're saying in an automated fashion and randomly pop that on the screen for you as part of what you're doing. I think that's the real promise of AI rather than like cloning other people's work.
Yeah,
my
yeah.
my promise is like the tools to help me market and promote. I'm totally for that, but to take my art and clone it and not pay me, I'm not into that.
Yeah, yeah. AI, that's a hot topic. I think that, for assistance, it's really good for different kind of tasks that we need help with. Even some research. I'm using a little AI to do research for the book. It's good, but it's not going to write the book. I have to write the book. In terms of, cloning, and it's pretty scary out there because you had like the fake Drake songs that were there, the fake Ariana Grande songs or Weekend songs. Like it's out there, and
Yeah, I don't
so
like that.
we have to see what the governing bodies will do to prevent that from happening. But we're kind of right at the beginning where it's like the wild wild west, so it's like a wait and see what happens and then adjust from there. So I think AI can be very beneficial. It's just how you use it and how strong your ethics are.
Yeah, I think it's like what happened like at the beginning of rap or the beginning of hip hop when bands like De La Soul ran into the problem where they didn't get the samples cleared,
Yeah.
and then you end up
Yeah.
having albums that didn't couldn't go out. I think that AI is going to run into the same situation. But my daughter's a graphic artist, and I think with music, digital rights management for music, I think that can get settled within AI. I think
Mhm.
eventually, because the copyright holders and people hold the masters, the lawyers are going to work it out. But the problem I've seen with a lot of graphic artists are arguing they need something like digital rights management for art. Because
Mhm.
my daughter's a graphic artist, and these AI programs are grabbing these artists' work and then acting like they created it from scratch when they didn't. They're
Mhm.
actually swiping it from artists and not paying them. So
Yeah.
that's where I think the artists are going to have to come up with agencies like BMI for graphic artists to register their work so that doesn't happen to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think that's what we're going to see happen. So let's kind of let's watch the news and all the different legislation that comes out.
Yeah, people have to be informed about what they're doing. They think they're using something, and they find out like it's not actually. There's, I guess, the ethics of what you're doing. Just because you
Mhm.
can do it, like
Right.
you could get a Ferrari that goes 200 miles an hour, doesn't mean you can actually drive 200 miles an hour on the street.
Facts. Yes, facts. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Time will tell. That's a tough one right there.
Yeah. But thank you for being on the program. I think you have a lot of really interesting applications for the GJ concept I've never actually seen outside of music being applied to business. And I think that's really cool. I like to bring people who have different points of view. I think that's a really cool way to look at art. And I'm totally in that space. And I'm just glad I was able to bring that to my audience. And I do
Mhm.
encourage people to go to your website, check it out, and interact with you after the fact, and connect with you and get into your whole world of the moneyexperience.com.
Wonderful. I appreciate you having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you and with you about a variety of topics. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
All right. You too. Take care.